This is a very plain rock. In fact, it's so plain that for the last 3,200 years or so, nothing much has happened to it at all. Sure, there are plenty of rocks like this in the fields surrounding Jericho, where I'm currently camping. When I hiked up to the top of the tell overlooking the city and pointed out the rock monolith that archaeologists believe was used as a boundary marker during the Bronze Age. Here it is up close, and in the next few minutes, I'm going to tell you the history of a very plain rock. These shepherds placed a small gray basalt rock monolith on the ground, inscribed it with a few letters of their Canaanite alphabet, and left it there to sit in the sun. Fast forward to 1938, when archaeologist Kathleen Kenyon and her team uncovered it during a dig in the area. He discovered that the inscription reads LKLM, which stands for Lachish, Kedem, Libnathim, or Lachish, Kedem and Libnathim belong to Malka. Lachish and Kidron were two nearby cities, but Libni isn't mentioned anywhere else in history. Its location hasn't been confirmed, but most scholars agree it was somewhere in the general vicinity. In the 9th century BC, it was conquered by the Assyrians, and in the 8th century by the Babylonians. Surely they didn't just ignore a stone monolith sticking out of the ground. Yet it remained in place for all these centuries, silently watching the world change around it. Imagine being a Roman soldier marching through the dusty streets of Jericho in the 1st century. You might have seen this rock monolith. An old inscription on it would have looked just as worn and faded then as it does now. The words of the Canaanite alphabet would have looked strange and archaic, just as they do to us today. Maybe someone told you that it was an ancient boundary stone, maybe not. But you would have continued on your way, having no idea that 2,000 years later, you would become a bit of an afterthought in a random guy's travel video. Then in the 6th century, it fell to the Persians. But there is one more chapter to its story. Around 300 years ago, some moss grew on it, but dried out before it could spread too far. Now, every once in a while, a bird will sit on it, pressing its tiny body against the rough surface, momentarily disturbing the pattern of cracks and crevices that have defined the rock's appearance for thousands of years. But just as quickly as it arrives, the bird flies away, leaving the rock to sit silently in the sun once again, patiently waiting for the next bird, the next traveler, or maybe an archaeologist, with too much time on their hands to come sit with it in the quiet fields surrounding the ancient city of Jericho. After Alexander the Great conquered the region in the 4th century, it was incorporated into the Egyptian kingdom. A special thanks to my supporters who make videos like this one possible. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. By the Ptolemaic dynasty in the 3rd century, it became part of the Seleucid Empire and eventually the Nabatean kingdom. And then in the 1st century, it was conquered by the Romans, who held it until the 7th century when it fell to the Arabs. So probably something like Lachish, Kedem, and Libni belonged to Malka. They dated the inscription to around 1200 BC and realized they had just found an artifact that could help answer some important questions about the history of writing and language in the region. The name means owner or chieftain, or perhaps even my king, but it could be a proper noun. If this is just a boundary stone, a marker indicating private property, rather than an official declaration of authority, it would suggest that the region was divided into smaller chiefdoms ruled by local potentates, rather than one large kingdom. But if it was an official declaration, then the region must have been under the control of a single ruler. Unfortunately, the text doesn't give us any more clues. And without further evidence, historians can only speculate. His full name might have been something like Malkeah, meaning "my king is Yahweh," or "Yahweh is king." The biblical Jehoshaphat, for instance, had the exact same name. It's as possible that he was a local chieftain who united these 3 cities under his rule, or that he was simply the owner of the land on which the cities were built. After all, the inscription says belong to Malka, not ruled by Malka. But what makes this one so special is that we know how long it's been here. All thanks to an inscription left by an ancient scribe more than 3 millennia ago. And the Israelites were wandering the desert after fleeing slavery in Egypt. Somewhere around here, a group of Canaanite shepherds were tending their flocks in the fields near the city of Jericho, then known as the City of Palm Trees, which is why today we know so little about the history of this period in the region. But in 1997, another team came across the rock again. This time they brought along a specialist in epigraphy, someone who studies ancient inscriptions. But unfortunately, they also had to leave before the job was done. There isn't much archaeological evidence left of them, but that doesn't mean they weren't here. We have evidence of human habitation dating back 11,000 years, but virtually nothing from these centuries, right before the Iron Age began around 1200 BCE. You see, this is that rock. You may remember it from my first video on this trip. Let's jump back in time to around 1200 BC, about the same time that Ramses II was busy building his empire. Now, for reasons apparently lost to history, maybe they were marking a boundary between plots of land. Maybe they were just having a little fun. Unfortunately, they couldn't stay and read the damn thing because World War II was raging and Britain had recalled all of its archaeologists from Palestine. In 2008, an Israeli archaeologist finally returned to study the rock monolith, now called the Tel El Mutzarif boundary stone, though most people just call it the Lost Stone. But who was Malka? We don't know for sure, and that poses a bit of a problem for anyone trying to piece together a coherent history of this period. What's most interesting about the Lost Stone, however, is what it doesn't tell us. Namely that this patch of land changed hands several times over the next few hundred years. Each of these empires would have had its own borders and administrative divisions. So yeah, nothing much has happened to this rock since it was first inscribed around 1200 BCE. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider supporting my work. This is the most relaxing thing I do when I'm feeling stressed. It's so calming, so good for anxiety or just to zone out to. This is the old-fashioned way of reading the phone book alphabetically. And now we can do it even faster with the help of our phones. So get your phone and let's go. When you see an entry, just say the name and the number out loud. If you want to, you don't have to. It's up to you. The point of this is to relax. Don't worry about anything else. We going to start with A, and we just going to scroll all the way down to the bottom of the list. They will almost always be easy to read and say it's that easy. Now let's do it again, shall we? Let's go. Sometimes they'll have special characters in them, but you can just ignore those. Sometimes they might have really long numbers. We're almost done. Just a few more names. I know it's hard sometimes to just sit still and relax. Back then, before phones, you had to physically flip through pages and pages of words. And now, bam, you can do it in a second with your phone. But you know, even though technology changes, this feeling stays the same. The relaxation, the peacefulness, the calmness. It's still the same. For example, some people might experience a sim-R when they listen to someone whispering or when they watch someone performing a repetitive task. Sure, they might not be for everyone, but for those who enjoy them, well, that's all the motivation I need to keep making them. And since you stuck around to the end of this video, I'm guessing you're one of those people. You appreciate the simpler things in life. You find joy in the mundane. And I think that's beautiful. Not exactly the same thing as reading a phone book, but I've always loved reading. It's a great way to relax and escape into another world. What about you? What do you like to do when you want to relax? Let me know in the comments below. Others might not experience Alzheimer's at all, but if you do, then you probably already know how relaxing and enjoyable it can be. It's a skill we have to practice. But when you get it right, it's so worth it. The fact that you stuck around to watch this whole video. You know, I didn't expect anyone to make it this far. I mean, come on. Who sits through a whole video about reading a phone book? But you did. You stuck around. You watched the whole thing. And I want to say thank you for that. That was so much fun. And the art of living a good life. I've got videos on positive psychology, mindfulness, self-improvement, and more. And hey, if you haven't already subscribed, then hit the subscribe button. I post new videos every week. And if you're one of those people, if you're one of my viewers who finds peace in the little things, then I want to ask you something. Have you ever heard of SMR? We've made it to the end of the list. And I remember when I was younger, it was my go-to way of falling asleep. I would just open up the dictionary, find a word that started with Z, because that's the last letter, and then I would read every definition until I got sleepy. Then I would fall asleep, and the dictionary would be right there with me. That was awesome. You can say them if you want to, but you don't have to. This is your relaxing moment. Enjoy it. And remember, there are no wrong entries. Let's keep going. Almost done. We're getting close. If you ever need to look up a random number, these are great for that too. This is nice, isn't it? These moments of calm are important. This is what it feels like to do nothing, to rest your mind. So if you were zoning out before, hopefully you feel more relaxed now. If not, maybe try it again later. And remember, you can do this anytime. Just open up the phone book and start scrolling. It's a break from all that stimulation. That's why it's so peaceful. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, V, F, G. Now I know some of you might think this is boring, but remember, it's supposed to be relaxing. It's not supposed to be exciting. I've been doing this for years, not with a phone book though, but with a dictionary. It's kind of funny how things change, right? Do you know what else is the same? How about this? You know, it's nice to know that there are people out there who appreciate these simple things, who like to relax and unwind. SMR stands for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response. It's a tingling sensation that some people experience in response to certain auditory or visual stimuli. That's why I love making videos like this. So thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, then please don't forget to like and subscribe. Hey, this is the host. If you like this video, then check out my other content where I explore the science of happiness. Here's a fun fact about me. I used to read the entire encyclopedia when I was a kid. Alright, I'm gonna go now and do some more research on SMR. I'm totally fascinated by it. Alright, take care. Bye. It was not an especially sunny day, but it was one of those days that begged for order. So while her brother Bert napped upstairs and her sister Agnes watched television downstairs, Mildred decided she would sort out her inheritance from her Aunt Agatha. Aunt Agatha had been a button enthusiast during her life, collecting an assortment of thousands of buttons, which she'd stored in a very large tin box that now sat on Mildred's kitchen table. The first thing Mildred did was to open the tin and take stock. Inside were thousands of buttons, ranging from small pearl ones to large wooden ones. There were even some plastic ones with cartoon faces on them. Mildred loved sorting things. In fact, she thought that was what she loved most in the world, putting things into categories. It brought her peace. So with a sigh of contentment, Mildred set about sorting through her aunt's collection of thousands of buttons. First, she decided to sort them by color. She started with the yellows and put all of the yellow buttons in a pile. This took longer than she expected because there were many shades of yellow, such as dandelion yellow, banana yellow, custard yellow, canary yellow, daffodil yellow, lemon yellow, school bus yellow, and golden yellow. After carefully organizing each shade of yellow into its own separate pile, Mildred moved on to the next color, blue. Again, there were many different shades of blue: sky blue, navy blue, baby blue, powder blue, sapphire blue, turquoise, teal, cobalt blue, periwinkle, and so on. Then came the reds and the pinks, the greens and the browns, the purples and the oranges, and the grays and the creams and the blacks and the whites. Once all the colors were sorted, Mildred looked at her handiwork with satisfaction. She had created 24 separate piles of buttons, each sorted by their dominant color. But then Mildred realized that just because the buttons were all grouped together by color didn't mean that they were necessarily similar. Some of these piles contained vastly different types of buttons. So Mildred spent the rest of the day and well into the night sorting through the 24 piles of buttons, creating subcategories. For example, within the pile of yellow buttons, there were many different shapes: round, oval, square, triangular, heart-shaped, star-shaped, cylindrical, kidney-shaped, barrel-shaped, octagonal, hexagonal, and so on. And then there were the sizes. Mildred found small buttons, medium-sized buttons, large buttons, tiny buttons, huge buttons, thin buttons, thick buttons, flat buttons, domed buttons, ridged buttons, shiny buttons, matte buttons. She continued sorting through her aunt's vast collection of buttons, organizing them not only by color, shape, and size, but by things like number of holes, material, whether they were plastic or metal, glass or wood, whether they were see-through or opaque, whether they were two-toned or multicolored, whether they were patterned or striped or polka-dotted. By the time Mildred finished sorting all of the buttons, she had created hundreds of piles of buttons, each containing just a few buttons that were exactly alike. And Mildred loved it. She loved nothing more than when everything had its proper place. As the sun rose the next morning, Mildred looked at all of her hundreds of piles of perfectly categorized buttons and decided that now she needed to sort the piles themselves. She started by arranging all the piles in rough order of size, smallest to largest. Then she organized them by shape: circular piles, oval piles, triangular piles, square piles, irregular shaped piles. Then she ordered them by color once more, placing all the gray piles in one group, all the brown piles in another group, all the green piles in another group, and so on. By late afternoon, all of the piles of buttons were themselves sorted into neat little piles. And Mildred, looking at her work, realized she still wasn't done. As she stared at her perfectly ordered piles of buttons, she noticed that though each individual pile was perfect, that is to say, all of the buttons within each pile were identical, the piles themselves were not identical. That is to say, some piles were made up of larger buttons, and some were made up of smaller buttons, and some were made up of more buttons than others. So Mildred took all of her piles and sorted them by how many buttons were in each pile. She made a pile of piles that had fewer than 10 buttons, another pile of piles that had between 10 and 50 buttons, another pile of piles that had between 50 and 100 buttons, and so on. And then finally, after organizing all of her piles into piles, Mildred decided to organize the piles of piles into yet another pile. This last pile would contain all of the other piles, and it would sit on top of the table like a kind of giant Jenga tower made entirely of piles of buttons. And Mildred stood back admiring her work, feeling as though nothing could possibly be more satisfying than this, that she had taken thousands of random buttons and arranged them not only by color and shape and size, but by the number of holes, the material, the transparency, the pattern, and finally by the number of piles that each pile belonged to. But then Mildred noticed something odd. Every time she looked at her tower of piles, it seemed as though there were more and more buttons spilling out from the top of the tower. No matter how many times Mildred organized her buttons, more and more buttons seemed to appear. So Mildred did the only logical thing she could think of. She spent the next several hours meticulously reorganizing all of the buttons, starting from the bottom of the pile and working her way to the top. She double-checked the color, the shape, the size, the number of holes, the material, the transparency, the pattern, and finally, the number of piles that each pile belonged to. But no matter how carefully she reorganized her buttons, every time she stepped away for a moment, more and more buttons seemed to appear. It was at this point that Mildred realized she would never be done sorting these buttons. There would always be more colors and more shapes and more sizes and more numbers of holes and more materials and more transparencies and more patterns and more numbers of piles. In fact, there were an infinite amount of ways to categorize these buttons, and there would always be some new variation of color or shape or size or material that she hadn't accounted for. But instead of being upset by this realization, Mildred felt oddly liberated. She understood now that there would always be more sorting to do. And so instead of trying to create the perfect system for categorizing all of these buttons, she could just enjoy the process itself. And so Mildred happily got to work, spending the rest of the day and the next day organizing her Aunt Agatha's vast collection of buttons, finding joy not in the final product, but in the process itself. And the sorting continued and continues to this day. And if you visit Mildred's house, you might see her in her kitchen, diligently organizing her buttons. Or if you're really lucky, she might invite you to join her in her endless sorting of buttons. The end. Hey there, welcome to my channel. I'm here today with another story about the time that I ran a marathon. No. This story doesn't have anything to do with running or marathons. It has to do with shelves. Yeah, shelves. It had been raining a lot lately, so there were puddles everywhere. The leaves were dripping. Even though it wasn't raining at that particular moment, the sky was gray. It matched Michael's mood. He was sitting on the floor in his living room, staring at a shelf that he had hung up the day before. Should he take it down, place it on the floor until he got around to finding another nail to hang it with? If it was still 2 degrees out of level, he would fix it. So he slept soundly that night, knowing that tomorrow was going to be a good day. When he woke up, the sun was shining through his window. It was a beautiful day, way better than yesterday. The rain had stopped and the clouds had disappeared. Michael got up, made himself some breakfast, poured himself a cup of coffee, and walked into his living room to check the shelf. As he looked at it, he knew that it was still slightly uneven. He admired how the shelf and the book seemed to complement each other. He walked up to the shelf and checked it. It was a perfect 2 degrees out of level. He knew that it wasn't exactly straight, but it was close enough. A small smile appeared on his face. Then he had to deal with the whole thing all over again. This story doesn't have anything to do with running or marathons. It has to do with shelves. Yeah, shelves. Did you know that shelves come in many different shapes and sizes? They can be made from all sorts of materials. You can put them in your house, in your office, in your garage, outside, inside. Shelves are great. The end. Maybe he thought, maybe perfection isn't attainable, but sometimes we have to stop trying to fix things. Also, if you're interested in reading the actual short story version of this story, you can find it on my blog, which is linked below. Thank you for listening. Have a great day. We have to learn to accept the imperfections in life. Sometimes it's okay if something is just 2 degrees off level. He wondered how long it would take before he forgot about the whole thing. But he knew that even if he did forget, the shelf would always be slightly uneven now. He walked away, feeling satisfied. By slightly uneven, I mean that it was 2 degrees out of level. He broke out his level again and checked it. Sure enough, it was still 2 degrees out of whack. Michael got up, made himself some breakfast, poured himself a cup of coffee, and walked into his living room to check the shelf. This time he felt as though he was ready to take action. He grabbed a screwdriver and removed one of the screws that was holding the shelf up. Then he took out the nail that was holding it in place. He knew that he couldn't control everything. He knew that he couldn't fix every problem. He knew that sometimes he just had to let go. He broke out a cigarette and lit it, took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. He smiled. He was happy with his life. He shifted the shelf slightly to the right, making sure that it was straight. Besides, it was only 2 degrees. What difference would it make if he fixed it? Then he put the screw back in and hammered in the nail. No, he liked how it looked on the wall. By slightly uneven, I mean that it was 2 degrees off level. Instead, he grabbed a book and placed it on the shelf. Every now and then, he would walk past the shelf and catch its eye. It seemed to mock him with its slight tilt. He kept thinking about what it would be like if he could fix it, if he could make it straight. And so he began planning his next move. It looked nice. He admired how the shelf and the book seemed to complement each other. He wondered how long it would take before he forgot about the whole thing. Maybe a week, maybe 2. But he knew that even if he did forget, the shelf would always be slightly uneven. He broke out his level again and checked it. Sure enough, it was still 2 degrees out of whack. He stared at it for a few minutes. He considered removing it, putting it on the floor until he could find another nail. But he knew that he would just end up hanging it back on the wall without fixing the angle. For the rest of the night, he couldn't help but glance at the shelf, wondering about its tilt. He kept imagining what it would be like if he could fix it, if he could make it straight. It didn't really bother him that much, but he knew that if he didn't do something about it, he would keep thinking about it every single time he looked at the shelf. It was a perfect 2 degrees out of whack, which would be pretty often, since it was right there in the living room. He knew that it was slightly uneven. By slightly uneven, I mean that it was off balance by 2 degrees. Yes, he had measured it. Did you know that they come in many different shapes and sizes? He hadn't planned on buying a shelf, but when he saw it, he thought, that would look nice in my living room. And so he brought it home. He unboxed it. The wood was sturdy, not too dark, not too light. He liked it. You can put them in your house, in your office, in your garage, outside, inside. He brought it into his living room, where he had left an empty space above his couch, just waiting for something nice to fill it. He hung the shelf with 2 nails, making sure that it was straight. At least he thought he did. They can be made from all sorts of materials. They're good for holding books, tools, knickknacks, Christmas decorations, even food. Shelves are great. However, sometimes a shelf will come slightly crooked. That is the subject of this story. It was a normal day, just another day. He had gone to the store to buy the shelf. It had been an impulse buy. He checked the shelf. It was off balance by exactly 2 degrees. He looked at it for a few minutes, admiring how nice it looked against the wall. He would get up early the next morning and measure it again. Then he went back into the living room later that evening and noticed that the shelf was slanted. At first, he thought that it was his imagination, that if he stood to the side, he could see that it was perfectly straight. But then he took out his trusty level, which he used often because he liked to make sure that everything was straight. In fact, it was a little bit of an obsession. So what was he to do? So he came up with a solution. As he looked at it, he knew that it was still slightly uneven, so he decided to leave it alone. He spent the rest of the day working, watching TV and playing games. The next morning, the sun was shining even brighter. It was another beautiful day. The rain had stopped and the clouds had disappeared. But this time he felt different. He looked at it. It looked nice. Later that day, he came back into the living room and pulled out his level. Michael stood there for a few moments longer, thinking about life. And so he lived happily ever after, or at least until one day when he decided to hang another shelf. Thank you for listening to the story about the time that I ran a marathon. No. Sometimes a shelf will come slightly crooked, That is the subject of this story. If you enjoyed this story, please feel free to check out more stories about the time that I ran a marathon on my channel. Oh, I'm going to show you today how to fold your towels better than anybody else. I was staying with my aunt and uncle, who live in this beautiful house that they built themselves 40 years ago. And it's still going strong. It's held up really well. And we have these thick, fluffy towels, but they were just kind of folded over there, and it wasn't really that satisfying. So I asked my aunt, "Hey, do you want me to teach you how to fold towels so that they stand up straight and look amazing?" And she said, "Oh yeah, sure. We've had these towels for 40 years. They're not going anywhere. Make sure those corners are lined up perfectly. Bring the top corner down, pat it out. Bring the opposite corner down, pat it out again, and then unfold it. Flip it around and do the same thing. Bring those corners up, bring the top corner down, and pat it out." Like even when I was unfolding the towels, I was like, oh, I got to unfold it perfectly. Also, there's more videos right there that I think you might like. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. But then I realized it doesn't really matter because you're going to fold it again. So why am I stressing myself out? And I think that goes for a lot of things in life. Sometimes we just stress ourselves out unnecessarily. So when you're folding towels, just try to relax and enjoy the process. Make sure you're retaking your time and you're redoing it right so that you end up with a really nicely folded towel at the end. But don't stress yourself out along the way. I think that's really important. Bring that bottom corner up and pat it out. Rotate it 90 degrees. Bring those corners up, bring the top corner down, pat it out, and then bring that last corner up and pat it out. Again, if you mess up at any time, just unfold the towel, flip it around, and start again. When you're done, you should have something that looks like this. Pretty cool, huh? But then I noticed her teenage nephew was standing by the door kind of awkwardly, and he was like, "Can I get in on this action?" You're just going to stack them up neatly on top of each other, and you could probably fit these into some shelves somewhere, or just keep them stacked up neatly on top of each other. And every time you go to grab a towel, you'll feel very satisfied because you know that when you put it back, it's going to look awesome. Can I learn how to fold towels? And I was like, yeah, man, I don't mind at all. This will only take about 3 minutes. Well, it ended up taking like 6.5 minutes because this dude just could not get it down. And I think he was doing it to impress his crush, who was also visiting them. Yeah, so let me tell you what he did, and maybe you can do it better. So first, he took the towel and tried to line up one corner with another corner, but I stopped him and said, "Hey, hold up. You want the corners to be aligned perfectly. You got to put the towel down and then use both hands to pat out any extra fluff. You want it to be nice and flat. Then you put the corner down, smooth it out, and then you put the other corner down on top of that." He did that, and it looked pretty good. And I was like, all right, let's stack them up. So he started to stack them up, but then he would get to the top, and the towels would just kind of flop over. So I was like, hold up, we gotta make sure we pat everything out again. And he did that, and it took forever. Finally, after 6 minutes and 32 seconds, he was able to get the towels stacked up neatly on top of each other, and it was really satisfying. But now I'm going to show you how to do it even better. First off, I would suggest folding your towels lengthwise about 2/3 of the way. That will give you a long, skinny rectangle. Fold it in half again. Just fold it in half the short way. And now we're going to start the really fun part. You're going to take the two bottom corners, fold them up, and then bring the top corner down over that. Pat everything out so there's no extra fluff, and then bring the opposite corner up and over, and pat everything out again. Now you're going to unfold that. Flip it around, and do the same thing. Bring those bottom corners up, bring the top corner down, pat it out. Bring that other corner up, then pat it out. And then after that, you want to rotate it 90 degrees, either way. It doesn't matter which way you go, as long as all four sides are showing. And you're gonna bring those bottom corners up, top corner down, pat it out, and then bring that last corner up and pat it out. You should have a nice little square or rectangle at this point. If you do it right, it should be able to stand up all by itself without leaning. It looks so nice. It looks so neat. And then what you're gonna do is take another towel and do the exact same process. Now, it's time to stack them up. It's funny because when I was trying to fold those towels, I found myself really focusing on making sure that every single thing was absolutely perfect. Okay, so that's how to fold a towel really well. I hope you enjoyed that story. If you did, please leave a thumbs up. Right now, if we were to leave this house and take a walk around our village, we wouldn't find anything out of the ordinary, because this is a very normal village. So we're going to take a walk through a very normal village. We'll start off by walking down this lane. We'll take a look at the hedges on either side of us, and it's held up really well over time. You can still see the shine in the stones. These are really high-quality stones. Whoever put these stones down here did a good job. All of the roads in this village are paved with cobblestones. People used to drive their tractors down this path to go into the fields, but those days are long gone. Most of the houses in this village have a garden gnome somewhere outside of their house. This one is an owl. It looks like he's looking up towards the sun. He's probably enjoying the warm weather. Another thing you'll notice about the houses here is that they're all pretty much the same. They make some of the best bread I've ever tasted. And across the street from the bakery is the butcher shop. I haven't been in here before, but apparently they have some great sausages. Almost everybody in town comes down here to fish every weekend. I hope you enjoyed our walk through a very normal village. If you did, please consider subscribing. We'd appreciate it. We'd also like to thank our supporters for helping us make these videos possible. If you'd like to support us, please check the links below. Thanks for watching. See you next time. I haven't been down here in a while, but I think I will go next weekend. And at the end of the road is the river. This is the Walkerville River. It's not really big enough to be called a river, but that's what we call it. Kids come down here to swim during the summer, and in the winter they come down here to ice skate. Over there is the old bridge. It collapsed a few years ago. They haven't rebuilt it yet. It's kind of far to walk all the way into town, so most people just stay away from this part of the river. We'll keep walking down the road and come to this intersection. These houses were all built in the early 1900s. At one point, the government wanted to tear most of these houses down and replace them with modern apartments. On the corner is the bank and next door is the flower shop. Back then, this was the place to be on a Friday night. Here's the hardware store. Mr. Williams works here. He's the nicest man. Every Wednesday afternoon, I come in here and buy supplies to build birdhouses. Birdhouses are my favorite thing to build. I've made hundreds of them over the years. Most of the wood I use, I get from this store. And next door to the hardware store is the old train station. The train stopped running here a long time ago. Now it's just an old abandoned building. I remember when I was young, my dad used to take me down here and show me the train tracks. He said if we walked far enough down the tracks, we'd find a hidden waterfall. I never believed him. I don't think there's a waterfall anywhere near here, but he kept insisting that there was. One day we went down here to look, but we couldn't find anything. We started to turn back when we heard a loud crash in the bushes. We stopped to look and saw a deer standing there staring at us. It must have fallen and hit its head because it was dazed and confused. My dad told me to stay here while he went into the bush to try and help the deer. I sat there on the tracks for what felt like hours. I was scared. What if a train came? Then I heard my dad yell out. I found it. He came running out of the bush with a bloody hatchet in his hands. I was scared. Dad, what happened? He looked at me and smiled. "The waterfall's real," he said, holding up the hatchet. He took the hatchet and carved a sign. He put the sign up on the wall, and it said, "Beware of gnomes." To this day, nobody knows where the waterfall is. But I'm pretty sure my dad knew where it was all along. It always smells so nice in here. Every Friday, Mrs. Peabody from down the street comes in here and buys a new bouquet of flowers. She puts the flowers in a vase and puts them on the table in her front room. I think she likes having something new to look at every week. We'll go across the street and continue walking. But when they asked the residents if they wanted to move into an apartment, everybody said no. They liked their homes and didn't want to move. So the government backed off and left everyone alone. Most of the houses here are made of brick. Brick is a popular material for building houses in this part of the country. It keeps the house cool in the summer and warm in the winter. Now this area has mostly been turned into a nature reserve. This one looks like he's trying to fix something. Maybe his shovel broke and he's trying to hammer it back into shape. As we continue walking down the road, we'll pass by this white house. It doesn't look like the other houses, but it's actually one of the oldest houses in the village. It was built around the 1850s, maybe earlier. It was built by one of the first settlers in the area. We don't know much about him, only that his name was Thomas, and he came from England. And whenever we're driving in the car, if we want to take a scenic route, we'll sometimes go down this path, but not much else. We'll go back to the main road and keep walking towards town. This makes it nice for walking, especially on a nice day like today. But it also makes it so no cars can get through here. Because there aren't any cars in this village, the people here have to walk everywhere they need to go. Some people do ride bikes, but most people walk. Most of the buildings in this part of town were built around the same time, maybe in the 1950s or 60s. This is where the post office is. Everybody in town knows where the post office is. It's a big landmark. When I was little, my mom would take me here every Saturday morning to pick up the mail. Back then, they had the best cookies. I don't think they do anymore, though. This is how we got our name, Walkerville. Most people walk through the village. Nobody rides their bikes. Well, almost nobody. Sometimes we do get the occasional unicycle. They're pretty average, just your standard hedges you'd see in any village. And then we'll continue walking down the road until we get to the end. They're trimmed and shaped nicely, which means someone takes really good care of them. If we were to stop and ask the owner of these hedges what type of plants they are, they would tell us they're yews. Yews are a common plant used to make hedges because they can grow tall and wide very quickly. They're a very hardy plant. They don't need to be watered, and they grow year-round. If we were to walk down the road a bit more, we'd eventually get to this turnoff. But anyway, we'll keep walking down the road. There's not much to see here, but we'll keep walking down the road. There's a cobblestone road that goes all the way into town. It was paved many years ago, maybe 20 or 30 years ago. And over the past few decades, the number of people riding scooters has been increasing every year. But the majority of people in this village still walk. As we walk down the road, you'll notice these hedges on either side of us. This turnoff isn't really used much anymore. You'll notice all of these garden gnomes on the left-hand side of the road. If we were to look down this path on the right-hand side, we'd see another garden gnome. And now we're finally starting to get into town. This is where the shops and restaurants are. Next door to the post office is the bakery. It smells delicious in here. This is where the bank is. Here's the old cinema. It closed down about 10 years ago. Anyway, we'll walk past the train station and come to this last road. We'll turn left and walk down here. This road leads to the river. Well, we've reached the end of our walk through Walkerville. I read it so often that both my kids know it by heart. Because if you look at it from an adult perspective, it actually makes perfect sense. Let me explain. So let's get started. And you might think that it's a story about snails, but really, it's about much more than that. This is the story of a snail who didn't want to go anywhere, but his friends kept coming over to try and convince him to come out of his shell. But we hear his inner monologue as he contemplates whether or not today feels like the day to inch forward. One of the characters shows up who is new to the story, a slug named Phil. So when Phil asks Gregory why he doesn't go anywhere, Gregory gives an answer that is so sad. He says it's too hard to move. And Phil replies, "That's not true. Look at me. I moved away from home a long time ago, and I travel everywhere." And then he adds this beautiful line, which is, "If you don't want to move, you're not even trying." We start off in a comfortable place, but in order to grow and learn, we need to be willing to step outside of our comfort zone. We need to be willing to take risks and face our fears. And along the way, we will meet people who will help us and support us, and people who will mock us and discourage us. But ultimately, it is up to us to decide what path we want to take. Ouch. This is the wake-up call that Gregory needs to realize that he is making excuses. The other snails in the story are very patient with Gregory. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you will check out my podcast. Thanks for watching, and take care. They understand that he's struggling, and they don't force him to do anything. They just keep trying to be good friends. And this is something that we can all strive to do. When we see someone who is struggling, we should be patient and understanding. We should not judge them or make them feel worse about themselves. Instead, we should try to help them in any way that we can. And unlike all the other characters who have been friends with Gregory for a while, and are just used to him saying no all the time, Phil is shocked. He says, "Why don't you come with us? You haven't been with us for such a long time." On the surface, this is obviously a story about a snail who is afraid to leave his comfort zone. But under the surface, it's a story about facing your fears, trying new things, and also about kindness and empathy. And Gregory says, "Well, I don't know. I don't feel like it today." And Phil looks at him confused and says, "But you never go anywhere." And this breaks my heart. I mean, how rude is that? Can you imagine being so direct? It must be exhausting to be so brutally honest. The book follows Gregory through his day. We see him sleeping, eating, drinking, and just generally being a very non-committal sort of guy. He gets a lot of visitors throughout the day, all his friends. The story ends with Gregory deciding to set out on a journey of his own to see the world. And this is where the illustrations become incredibly symbolic. They show Gregory as transformation from someone who has been stuck in their comfort zone for so long that they forget what it is like to move into someone who is discovering the beauty of the world. He knows what to expect each day, and he doesn't like changes to his schedule. This is why he refuses to go anywhere with his friends. He's afraid of what might happen if he steps outside of his comfort zone. But as the story progresses, Gregory begins to realize that his fear is just that, fear. And he realizes that he's making excuses for why he can't do something. And this is a very common experience for adults. We often make excuses for why we can't pursue our dreams or take risks. We tell ourselves that it's too late, or that we're not good enough, or that we don't have enough time. But the truth is that we're just afraid. His eyes are open wide with wonder, and he seems almost weightless as he floats down the page. They try to persuade him to do something, anything. All they ask is that he join them, but he refuses. The snail keeps thinking about going somewhere, about doing something, but he never does. And while the story is extremely simple, it has so many layers that work on different levels. It's about facing your fears, overcoming obstacles, trying new things, and also about kindness and empathy. So when I was reading this book, I was wondering if I can adapt it for adults. I don't feel like following anyone to the meadow today. And Harry replies, "Oh, Gregory, you say that every day." When his friend Beatrice asks him to come see her collection of pretty pebbles, Gregory says, "I don't feel like seeing any pretty pebbles today," says he. And Beatrice says, "Oh, Gregory, you say that every day." When Larry asks him to come play hide and seek, Gregory responds, "I don't feel like playing hide and seek today." And Larry says, "Oh, Gregory, you say that every day." Even Gregory's mother tries to convince him to come with her to pick blackberries, but he declines. The snail who is almost moving by Rachel Isadora. Follow the slow journey of Gregory the snail. Well, sort of. He doesn't actually move for a long time. When his friend Harry asks him to follow into the meadow, Gregory says, and then something interesting happens. The thing is, though, he's right. He finally understands what the problem is, and he thanks Phil for helping him to see that. So now let's talk about why this book works so well on an adult level. When we first meet Gregory, he is very comfortable in his routine. Gregory's journey is a metaphor for the journey that we all go through in life. Another theme in the story is the importance of kindness and empathy. This is a very simple story with a lot of depth. It is a story about growth, change, and the importance of being kind to others. We've all done it before. You know, just laid back and counted clouds. When I was young, I spent hours upon hours doing it. But there's something about it that really soothes me, even to this day. The sun is shining through the leaves, casting dancing patterns across the ground. The air is warm and inviting. There's not a sound to be heard except for the gentle breeze rustling the leaves overhead. You lie back and close your eyes, breathing deeply, soaking up the atmosphere. But you don't mind. You're not here to count the clouds anyway. You're here to relax and enjoy the moment. So you close your eyes again and let the gentle breeze rock you back and forth like a boat on a calm sea. It's just the reason why I have hundreds of cloud names saved on my phone to this very day. You feel relaxed and rejuvenated, ready to take on the rest of the day. The late afternoon sun beat down on the grassy field as a lone figure lay sprawled out on the ground. His face was turned skyward, his eyes half closed in blissful relaxation. He was completely alone, lost in his own thoughts as he watched the clouds drift lazily overhead. You may never know how many clouds you counted that day, but you do know that you had an absolutely wonderful time doing it. He had no watch or phone to tell the time, but he knew he had been lying there for hours already. The only sound that broke the silence was the gentle rustling of the leaves in the trees at the edge of the field and the occasional chirp of a bird. You may have tried to ignore them or push them aside, but when you're fully present, there's no room for anything but the here and now. That's why counting clouds can be such a powerful tool for breaking free from negative thoughts. It allows you to focus on something simple and repetitive, which can help quiet the chatter in your mind and bring you back to the present moment. It was a perfect afternoon. In that moment, he felt truly free. He stood up, brushed the dirt off his clothes, and walked slowly towards his car. The wind picked up and the temperature dropped, signaling the end of the perfect day. As he drove home, he couldn't help but think about how lucky he was to have found this place. He had seen so much already, from the dragon clouds to the abstract shapes, but he knew there was always something more to discover. With each visit, he felt himself becoming more relaxed and at peace. The stress and worries of everyday life seemed to fade away when he was surrounded by the beauty of nature and the tranquility of a vast open field. The sky was ablaze with colors of orange, pink, and purple as the clouds reflected the setting sun. Our protagonist continued to lie in the field, entranced by the ever-changing shapes above him. Lie down in a field and stare up at the clouds. You never know what you might see. It had given him the peace and relaxation he needed, and it had reminded him of the power of the present moment. Or maybe you'll just see some fluffy white shapes floating across the sky. Either way, you'll feel better afterwards. Around him, the grass was a sea of green, stretching as far as he could see in every direction. Look up at the clouds and let your worries drift away. You never know what you might see. They re a reminder that beauty can be found in the simplest of things if we just take the time to appreciate it. There wasn't a single tree or building in sight, just endless fields and clear blue skies dotted with fluffy white clouds. This one is larger and has a more defined shape. As you watch, the cloud seems to take on a life of its own, morphing and changing with the wind. There were clouds shaped like dragons, mythical creatures with wings spread wide, soaring through the heavens. There were clouds shaped like animals, from fluffy sheep to majestic lions. As he drove, he couldn't help but smile, thinking about all the amazing clouds he had seen. It had been a truly special day, and he couldn't wait to go back and do it all again. And then there were the more abstract shapes, the swirls and curves that seemed to have been created by an artist's brush. He had no worries or cares in the world. He was completely free, and honestly, most of them are boring. So today, I want to share with you the most interesting ones I've ever seen. It's going to be an interesting afternoon. Each time he had felt a sense of calm wash over him, a feeling of being connected to something bigger than himself. He realized that what he was doing was more than just counting clouds. It was a form of meditation, a way to focus his mind on the present moment and let go of all his worries. Slowly, you begin to drift towards a peaceful sleep, but then suddenly you hear a voice that pulls you from your slumber. What was the point of counting clouds? He had always loved to count clouds as a kid, but why did he still do it now? Was it the peace and quiet that it brought him? Or was there something more? Cloud one, the voice says. You open your eyes and look up to see a cloud above you. Cloud no 2, the voice says. As you continue to stare at the sky, you see more and more clouds floating by, each one unique and distinct from the last. The voice continues, Cloud no 3, and you find yourself captivated by the game. Hours pass and you become completely immersed in counting the clouds. It's almost hypnotic, and yet you can't help but feel a sense of calm wash over you. Before long, you've counted so many clouds that you lose track. Suddenly, another voice interrupts your reverie. Cloud 4, it says. You open your eyes to see a different cloud than the ones you saw before. You find yourself drawn into the rhythm of the clouds passing overhead, each one more fascinating than the last. You spend the rest of the afternoon lost in this peaceful state of mind, counting clouds and forgetting about the rest of the world. As the sun begins to set, you finally tear your gaze away from the sky and take a deep breath. And as you go about the rest of your day, you can't help but smile, thinking back to the peaceful afternoon you spent counting clouds over a flat field. Every so often, he would let out a soft sigh, a small smile playing on his lips. He had come to this place seeking peace and quiet, a break from the hustle and bustle of everyday life, and he had found it in spades. And as he lay there counting clouds, he couldn't help but feel a sense of contentment wash over him. Then suddenly, a thought struck him. Why was he doing this? He thought back to the countless times he had lain in fields and counted clouds. When you focus on the present moment, all the negative thoughts and emotions that have been holding you back can finally start to dissipate. This is what he had been doing all along without even realizing it. And he couldn't help but smile. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, he knew it was time to go. He knew that he would never forget this day, and he couldn't wait to go back and do it all again. Hours passed, and the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon. But now the sky was filled with some truly spectacular sights. He could have stayed there forever, lost in the beauty of it all. But eventually, the sky began to darken, and the clouds took on a more ominous appearance. With a heavy heart, he packed up his things and headed home. Every time he returned to the field, he hoped to see something new and exciting in the sky. And so he continued to visit the field again and again, drawn in by the promise of endless wonder and the peaceful solitude it offered. And as the years passed, he knew that he would continue to find solace in the simple act of lying in a field and counting clouds. So if you ever find yourself feeling stressed or overwhelmed, take a break and go outside. Maybe you'll see a dragon or a lion or something even more fantastical. The clouds are always changing, always moving, always offering something new to marvel at. And when you take the time to really look up and appreciate the clouds, you might just find that you feel better too. So next time you're feeling down, head out to the nearest park or field and lie down in the grass. When you take a thing that is fundamentally designed to be paired and then remove one half of the pair, the result is, well, existential dread. It was at this moment that a man understood that what he had just done would forever alter his life. And when he looked down at the lone sock in his hand, he knew that there was only one thing left to do. This was the start of the great sock pairing adventure. His first step was to open up the drawer containing his collection of socks. It was a big drawer, but it wasn't as big as the task ahead. But then again, the great Sockovich was never deterred by something as trivial as the size of the challenge. For many men, the quest to find the other mate for their lost sock is an arduous one. There were striped ones, argyle ones, and even a few with funny faces on them. But none of them had a match. With mountains of laundry, often separating the single from their other half, they may never see each other again. Just when he was about to give up, he felt something strange. There was a small bulge in the corner of the drawer. Could it be? He reached into the darkness and pulled out a sock. It was dark gray with a yellow stripe, something he hadn't seen yet. One was slightly faded, while the other was brand new. He pondered this for a moment, wondering if they were a match, but ultimately decided that he couldn't risk it. So he took a deep breath and decided to keep going. "Eureka!" he cried. "That's why they don't match. They're different sizes." Could it be possible that the hole had caused the size difference? He carefully stitched around the hole, making sure to match the original stitch as closely as possible. When he was finished, he pulled the sock back onto his hand and examined his handiwork. The hole was gone, and the sock was as good as new. He examined the sock more closely and saw that the hole was just above the toes and had been repaired with a simple stitch. Just when he was about to give up, he felt something soft under his foot. He had finally found a matching pair. But he knew that there were still more socks to go. He looked down and saw that the other sock had been stuck to the bottom of the drawer all along. It was covered in dust and dirt, but it was a perfect match nonetheless. It was obvious that someone had tried to fix the sock, but the repair had failed. But that didn't explain why they were in the same drawer. As he pulled out the second sock, he saw that it was a perfect match for the first. He said to himself, feeling as though he had just conquered Mount Everest. With renewed energy, he delved back into the drawer, eager to find the next matching pair. In no time, he had repaired the heel, and both socks were good as new. He put them on and smiled. All he had to do now was find a matching pair for the small one. He searched high and low, but there was no luck. There was a small pile of socks in the corner of the drawer that he hadn't looked at yet. He reached into the pile and pulled out a sock. It was a perfect match for the one on his foot. But where was its mate? Every sock he pulled out seemed to have some kind of flaw. Some were too big, others too small, and some were simply the wrong color. It was also dark gray with a yellow stripe. He was so excited that he almost missed the tiny hole in the heel of one of the socks. He looked at the clock on the wall and realized that he had been at this for hours, but he didn't care. He was on the verge of a breakthrough. He put the faded sock back into the drawer and continued searching. The colors were spot on, but the size was different. One sock was small, the other large. He tried putting them together, but it just didn't seem right. Was this a match made in heaven, or a disaster waiting to happen? However, our protagonist was not like the other men. Oh, no. Our hero would not rest until the pairing was complete. Then he found a pair of green socks, but one was fuzzy and the other wasn't. Even the patterns were a mystery to him, with some featuring tiny squares and others sporting stripes so thin they were almost invisible. But he was determined to find their matches, no matter how long it took. He would go through every single sock in his drawer, even if it took all day. Yes, that's right, all day. It didn't matter. And so, with renewed vigor and a healthy dose of determination, he began his journey. He pulled open the drawer, revealing a colorful array of socks, each vying for his attention. But he wasn't looking at them. He was on a mission. What he needed to do was sort through these socks, and he began doing so without any hesitation. Not particularly exciting, but it did have a partner, which couldn't be said for some of the others. And as he held it up, he saw that there were 3 other socks with the same pattern, but none of them matched. Now he was in a pickle. He could put 2 of the similar colored ones together and call it a day, but he wanted to do better than that. And he knew that somewhere in that drawer was the missing piece of the puzzle. But this was nothing compared to what he found next. The first sock he pulled out was simple. It was white with a thin red stripe around the top. In the second sock, he found a colorful argyle pattern that clashed with everything else in the drawer. With renewed vigor, he continued his search, pulling out sock after sock, each more interesting than the last. He came across a pair of socks that were almost identical, except for one small detail. As the morning wore on, he began to lose hope. It seemed as though the matching socks had vanished into thin air. But where was its mate? He checked the bulge again and felt another sock. "Aha!" he exclaimed. Finally, he had a match. Oh well, he thought, this won't do. But he had an idea. He pulled out his sewing kit and got to work. Now let's move on to the next one. He found a pair of red socks, but they were different shades of red. After what felt like hours, he finally found a pair that was almost identical. He considered giving up, but then he remembered what his grandfather had told him. Never give up until you've tried everything. And then he saw it, a small label on the inside of the sock that read XL. Then he noticed something strange. The large sock had a small hole near the toe, while the small one was completely intact. But our hero wasn't about to give up. He pulled out his sewing kit and got to work. He put on the small sock and looked at the large one in his hand, but he wasn't about to give up. He had come too far to quit now. Suddenly, he spotted something strange. He looked all around, but couldn't find the other sock anywhere. Overjoyed, he put on the second sock and admired his handiwork. He took a deep breath and prepared for the next challenge. This is one of my favorite stories that we've ever done. It's so fun to write. I hope you enjoy it. Hi, welcome back to my channel. If you don't know me, I am a comedian, and this is where I share my comedy. If you're new here, please subscribe. We're trying to get to 2 million subscribers by the end of the year. After living in this house for almost 4 years, I had collected a lot of beige paint swatches from various stores. I have an embarrassing amount of paint swatches. There's barely a difference between those two. Next, we have Sandy Hook. No, not that one. Sandy Whisper. As you can tell, I have way too many paint swatches. If you did, please hit the like button. That really helps me out. And also subscribe so you never miss an upload. I would really appreciate that. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Bye. I'm thinking about going to my local store and getting some samples of these colors so I can paint them on my walls and see which one I like best. It's going to be so much fun. I can't wait. That's the one I want to say. Next we have Creamy Almond. Creamy Almond sounds yummy. I wonder what that looks like. Creamy Almond. Alright, next we have Light French Vanilla. Ooh, I like that one. Light French Vanilla. Light French Vanilla. Next we have another Creamy Almond. See? Look at these. Are they the same? Are they? Let me know in the comments. Next we have something else. Oh my gosh. Oh my god. There's so many. There's so many. There's so many different types of creamy almond. Next we have buff. Just buff. Just buff. Then we have Chateau d'Abundance. Chateau d'Abundance. Ah, I love that one. And then we have Edgecombe Gray. Is that gray? Because I thought gray was gray and brown is brown. Why are they mixing the two together? Next we have Flax. Oh wow, look at this. So many different types of beige. And then we have something else. Oh, there's too many. Oh my god, there's too many to read. There's too many to read. I can't even see. Next we have Harvest Gold. Harvest Gold. Next we have something else. What is this one? This one right here. Oh my god. Oh, what is it? I can't see. Just kidding. It says mascarpone. Mascarpone. Next, we have something else. What is this one? Oh my god. Oh, what is it? I can't see. Just kidding. It says Sandy. Another Sandy. Oh, and it says Sandy Beak. Sandy Beak. Sandy Beak. Next, we have something else. This one says Spice of Life. Spice of Life. Oh, I love that. Next, we have something else. Oh, what is this one? Oh my god. Oh, what is it? I can't see. Just kidding. It says Still Water. Still Water. Still Water. Next, we have Swiss Coffee. Ooh, Swiss Coffee. And then we have something else. Oh, what is this one? Oh my god. Oh, what is it? I can't see. Just kidding. It says Vanilla Frappe. Vanilla Frappe. Vanilla Frappe. Next, we have Wall Street. Wall Street. And then we have something else. Oh, what is this one? Oh my god. Oh, what is it? I can't see. Just kidding. It says Wheat. Wheat. Next, we have Winfield. Winfield. And then we have something else. Oh, what is this one? Oh my god. Oh, what is it? I can't see. Just kidding. It says Winter Wheat. Winter Wheat. Next, we have Worldly Gray. Worldly Gray. And then we have something else. Oh, what is this one? Oh my god. Oh, what is it? I can't see. Just kidding. It says Xanadu. 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 And then we have something else. Oh, what is this one? Oh my god. Oh, what is it? I can't see. Just kidding. It says yet another creamy almond. Yet another creamy almond. Creamy almond. Creamy almond. Creamy almond. Creamy almond. All right. Next, we have yet another Sandy. Yet another Sandy. Sandy, Sandy, Sandy. And then we have yet another wheat. Yet another wheat. Wheat, 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 wheat. And then we have something else. Oh, what is this one? Oh my god. Oh, what is it? I can't see. Just kidding. It says yet another Winfield. Yet another Winfield. 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 And finally, last but not least, we have yet another Vanilla Frappe. Yet another Vanilla Frappe. Vanilla Frappe. Vanilla Frappe. Vanilla Frappe. Vanilla Frappe. So I would really appreciate if you could subscribe and be a part of that. But let's move on to the story. They don't understand why I love it so much. I just do. I think it's because I grew up in a house painted this color, and I associate so many fond memories with it. My mother refused to paint the house any other color when I was growing up, because she said it would make her skin tone look sickly in comparison. Well, here I am, as an adult, finally painting my own home in this color. So I wanted to compile a list of all the beige swatches I had collected over the years, and read them aloud for your entertainment. Please join me on this journey. This story comes from Margaret. I recently moved into a house that desperately needed a fresh coat of paint. My friends and family always laugh at how much I love beige. Here goes nothing. This list is in no particular order. First, we have Sandy Whisper. Then next, we have Oatmeal Fog. And that's the end of the list. Thanks for listening. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this story about Margaret and her collection of beige paint swatches.